When one speaks of the soul, of its longings and its struggles, we inevitably find ourselves confronted by shame. Shame is one of the most ancient companions of the human spirit. It sits in the shadow of our earliest memories, and it colors the way we see ourselves long before we are able to give it a name. Shame is the voice that whispers, "You are not enough. You are unworthy of love. You must hide who you truly are." And yet, at the same time, it is precisely shame that calls us toward the work of self-understanding, toward the journey of discovering our worth beyond masks and judgments. As I speak to you now, I want you to imagine this conversation as if we were sitting together in a quiet study, the fire gently warming the room, shadows dancing on the walls. For I have always believed that the great questions of the soul are best spoken of in intimacy, as if between old friends. Shame and self-worth are not abstract concepts, but living forces within the psyche. They influence the way you walk into a room, the way you look at yourself in the mirror, the way you dare to love and to be loved. To understand shame, we must go back to the beginning. We must look at the earliest impressions of the child, the pressures of family, the invisible expectations of society. For shame is not born within us as an evil, but as a consequence of our deep need for belonging. It is a signal that we fear rejection, that we long to be seen and accepted. But when misunderstood, shame becomes a poison to the soul, a wound that lingers in silence. And so let us begin this exploration. Together, we will travel into the origins of shame, its relationship to the shadow, the masks we wear to conceal it, and the paths by which it can be transformed into self-worth. This is not merely a psychological lesson. It is an invitation to look gently and honestly at your own life. Let us start at the root, the origins of shame. Chapter 1, the origins of shame. If we are to understand shame, we must return to the earliest years of our existence. The newborn child arrives in the world without shame. It does not question whether it is worthy of love, or whether its cries are too loud, or whether it should restrain its hunger. The infant simply is full of need, full of instinct, full of being. There is no self-consciousness in the infant, no mirror held up to judge. But as the child grows, it enters into the world of relationship. Here, the first seeds of shame are sown. The child looks into the face of the mother, the father, the caretakers, and learns to read their expressions. Approval feels like sunshine. Disapproval feels like a chill. In these subtle exchanges, the child begins to sense that parts of itself are welcomed, while other parts are frowned upon, punished, or ignored. A toddler who shouts with wild joy may be told, "Be quiet, don't be so loud." A child who cries easily may hear, "Stop crying, don't be weak." A curious child who asks endless questions may be scolded for being too much. And so slowly the child learns that to be accepted, one must prune away certain aspects of the self. This pruning is the beginning of shame. I have often spoken of the psyche as composed of both the conscious and the unconscious. What the child learns to reject in itself, the impulses, feelings, and desires that earn disapproval, are pushed into the unconscious. This hidden reservoir is what I have called the shadow. And shame is the gatekeeper that stands at its door, warning us never to bring those rejected parts into the light. Shame is not only personal, however, it is also cultural. Each society decides which traits are honorable and which are shameful. In one culture, obedience may be prized, and so defiance is shamed. In another culture, independence is celebrated, and so dependence is shamed. The individual carries these cultural verdicts deep within, often mistaking them for absolute truths about the self. But perhaps the most painful aspect of shame is its silence. Unlike anger, which bursts outward, or sadness, which seeks release through tears, shame turns inward. It makes us hide. It makes us avert our eyes, lower our voice, retreat from contact. Shame says, if they see who I really am, they will turn away. This silence is often more devastating than the original wound, for it convinces us that we are alone in our unworthiness. I have seen this pattern countless times in the lives of patients. A man successful in his career feels a hollow emptiness that no achievement can fill. Beneath his persona, the mask of competence he shows to the world, lies a boy who was told he was never good enough, whose every mistake was shamed. A woman, admired for her kindness, secretly despises herself for moments of anger because as a child she was punished for expressing frustration. And so she hides her anger, pushing it into the shadow where it festers as self contempt. To trace shame back to its origins is to recognize that it is not simply a personal failing. It is not proof that one is defective. It is rather a response to the human need for love and belonging. Shame arises where love feels conditional, where acceptance seems fragile. The child concludes, if I am to survive in this family, in this culture, I must hide parts of myself. I must become someone else. And yet, there is a paradox here. For while shame hides, it also points to where the soul longs to be healed. The very places where you feel most unworthy are often the places where your deepest vitality lies. The child who is told to be quiet may carry within them a powerful voice. The one who was shamed for anger may hold the seed of passion and justice. The one who was told they were ugly or inadequate may carry a unique beauty that shines only when they dare to be seen. When we look honestly at the origins of shame, we begin to see that it is not the enemy, but a signal. Shame tells us where we have been wounded in love, where we have learned to fear rejection. And if we can listen without judgment, we may begin to uncover the hidden treasures of the shadow, the lost parts of ourselves waiting to be reclaimed. Let me offer a metaphor. Imagine a great tree standing in a meadow. Its branches stretch high, reaching for the sun, while its roots sink deep into the earth. But imagine that when the tree was young, someone tied cords around certain branches, forcing them to grow inward, or perhaps even cut off shoots that seemed unruly. The tree still grows, but in a constrained shape, twisted by the forces imposed upon it. This is the soul under shame. It grows, it adapts, but it bears the marks of what was pruned away. And yet, if given time, if the cords are removed and the soil is nourished, the tree can begin to grow freely once again. New branches may sprout, old wounds may heal. So it is with the human spirit. To recognize shame is to begin loosening the cords that bound us in childhood. It is to allow the soul to stretch once more toward its natural form. One must also understand that shame is contagious. Parents who themselves were shamed often pass it on unconsciously to their children. A father who was told to be stoic and unemotional may shame his son for crying. A mother who was once mocked for her curiosity may silence her daughter's questions. The cycle continues generation after generation until someone has the courage to pause and say, this ends with me. The work of confronting shame is not only personal, it is also ancestral. To free yourself from shame is to free those who come after you. When you claim your worth, you break the cycle of silence. But let us not be too harsh on those who instilled shame in us. Often they too were victims of shame. They believed, perhaps unconsciously, that by pruning us, they were preparing us to survive in the world. They thought that discipline, criticism, or silence would make us strong. And so part of healing shame is forgiveness, not the denial of pain, but the recognition that we are all caught in the web of human frailty. And so, dear listener, as you reflect on your own life, I invite you to ask, where did shame first enter? What expressions of your soul were silenced? What parts of you were deemed unacceptable, unworthy, or too much? These questions may stir pain, but they also open the doorway to freedom. For the truth is this, your worth was never lost, it was only hidden. Beneath the layers of silence, beneath the masks you have worn, beneath the fear of rejection, there remains the original spark of the child, unashamed, full of life, simply existing as itself. To remember this spark is the first step toward reclaiming your self-worth. Chapter 2, The Shadow and Shame. When we speak of shame, we soon arrive at the threshold of what I have called the shadow. The shadow is not a monster outside of us, but rather the hidden half of the psyche, the place where we conceal the parts of ourselves that we believe are unacceptable. And shame, like a strict guard, stands at its entrance. If we imagine the psyche as a house, then the shadow is the cellar where we store away the things we do not wish others to see. But it is not only the unseemly traits, anger, envy, selfishness, that are locked away. Often, our greatest vitality, creativity, and passion are also placed in the shadow simply because they once provoked disapproval or rejection. Shame does not discriminate between what is good or bad. It hides whatever threatens our sense of belonging. To understand the shadow is to understand that each human being carries within them a second self, not an evil self, but a neglected one. The shadow contains all that we are but do not wish to acknowledge. It is our repressed anger, our unspoken desires, our unlived talents. It is, in short, the life that we might have lived had shame not silenced us. Consider a child who expresses strong emotions. If the child's tears are mocked or punished, the message is clear: your vulnerability is not welcome. In response, the child may push tenderness into the shadow, learning to wear a mask of toughness. But beneath this mask, shame lingers, whispering that softness is a defect. Or think of a young girl who shows natural leadership, a fiery spirit that seeks to guide others. If her family or culture insists that such boldness is unfeminine or undesirable, she may repress her confidence, placing it in the shadow. She grows up quiet, hesitant, self-doubting, all the while carrying within her a buried strength. The shadow, then, is not only a place of darkness, but also a reservoir of potential. Shame is what convinces us to lock the door, but it is also what signals where the hidden treasures lie. Now, why is it so difficult to face the shadow? Because shame convinces us that what lies within is dangerous. Shame says, if they knew this about you, they would reject you. If you admitted this, you would lose love. And so we build elaborate defenses, personas, to conceal what we fear. The persona is the mask we show to the world. It is not false in the sense of being a lie. Rather, it is a partial truth. We highlight those aspects of ourselves that earn approval and conceal the rest. A man may cultivate an image of strength while hiding his vulnerability. A woman may present endless kindness while suppressing her anger. The persona is useful. It allows us to navigate society. But when we identify with it too strongly, we forget that it is only a mask. Shame fuels the persona. It tells us that without the mask, we are unworthy. And so we cling to it desperately, afraid that if it were to slip, others would see the real self and turn away. But the truth is the opposite. The more we deny the shadow, the more power it gains. What is repressed does not disappear. It seeps into our lives in hidden ways. The anger we suppress may explode in sudden outbursts. The vulnerability we deny may show up as physical illness. The creativity we ignore may return as envy of those who express themselves freely. The shadow always finds a way to speak. One of the great tasks of psychological growth is what I have called individuation, the process of becoming whole. And individuation requires that we turn toward the shadow. This does not mean acting out every hidden impulse, but rather acknowledging its existence, understanding its origin, and integrating it into consciousness. When we confront shame directly, we discover that the shadow is not as frightening as we once believed. The traits we rejected are not monstrous. They are human. They are parts of ourselves that long to be seen and accepted. And in embracing them, we do not become less moral or less worthy. We become more whole. Let me give you an example. A patient once came to me, a man who prided himself on being rational, disciplined, and composed. He wore his persona like a finely tailored suit. Yet beneath this mask, he carried a profound shame about his sensitivity. As a boy, he had been scolded for crying, told that real men do not show weakness, so he locked away his tenderness, hiding it in the shadow. In his adult life, this shame manifested as a coldness. He struggled to connect with his wife and children. He felt isolated even as he excelled professionally. Through our work, he slowly came to acknowledge that his sensitivity was not a defect but a gift. As he allowed himself to feel, to cry, to express vulnerability, he discovered a depth of intimacy he had long denied himself. What shame had hidden turned out to be a source of profound connection. This is the paradox of the shadow. What we fear most about ourselves often holds the key to our healing. Shame tells us, this part of you is unworthy. But when we dare to look, we often find that this very part carries the medicine we need. We must also remember that the shadow is not only individual, but collective. Entire societies create shadows. A culture that prizes wealth may shame poverty. A culture that glorifies youth may shame aging. A culture that values conformity may shame individuality. These collective shadows weigh upon us all, shaping our sense of worth. To confront shame, then, is also to question the values of the society we inhabit. Now, let us consider the role of dreams. Dreams are the voice of the unconscious, and they often reveal the contents of the shadow. A person who represses anger may dream of violent storms, of eruptions, of uncontrollable forces. A person who hides their sexuality may dream of forbidden encounters. Dreams show us in symbolic form what shame has pushed out of sight. They invite us to listen to the shadow with curiosity rather than fear. In my own life, I have often observed how confronting the shadow requires courage, but also compassion. It is not enough to expose the hidden parts. We must also greet them with kindness, for shame is easily reawakened. If we uncover a hidden trait only to judge it again, we simply drive it deeper into the dark. True healing requires that we say to ourselves, yes, this too is me. This too has a place in my soul. But you may ask, what if the shadow contains destructive impulses? What if shame hides genuine cruelty, selfishness, or violence? Here we must be discerning. To integrate the shadow does not mean indulging every impulse. It means acknowledging it consciously so that it does not control us unconsciously. A man who denies his aggression may harm others without realizing it. But a man who acknowledges his aggression can channel it into healthy assertiveness, into protection, into strength. The shadow, once brought to light, can be transformed. Shame resists this work because it clings to the illusion of safety. It says, hide this and you will be loved. Reveal it and you will be abandoned. But in truth, hiding only deepens loneliness. The persona may win us approval, but it cannot bring true intimacy. Only when we dare to show the shadow, carefully, wisely, to those who can hold it, do we find genuine connection. I often tell my patients, you do not need to be without flaws to be worthy. Worth is not earned by perfection. It is inherent in your existence. The shadow does not make you unworthy. It makes you human. Let us return to the image of the house. If you live only in the brightly lit rooms and lock away the cellar, your home will always feel incomplete. You will sense, perhaps in the creak of the floorboards or the draft in the walls, that something is missing. To descend into the cellar, lantern in hand, is frightening. But as you illuminate the dark, you may find not monsters, but forgotten treasures, old photographs, lost heirlooms, seeds waiting to be planted. The shadow is much the same. What shame tells us to avoid is often the very place where our vitality waits. So, dear listener, I invite you to ask yourself, what lies in your shadow? What have you hidden because shame told you it was unworthy? Is it your anger, your desire, your sensitivity, your ambition? What would it mean to open the door gently, to peer inside with curiosity rather than judgment? The shadow is not the enemy. Shame is not a sentence of exile. Both are invitations, invitations to wholeness. By confronting them, we reclaim the fullness of our being. In the chapters ahead, we will see how the persona, the shadow, and shame intertwine. We will explore how shame distorts our relationships, how it is shaped by culture, and how it can be transformed through the process of individuation. But for now, remember this: the shadow is not a place of disgrace, but a place of possibility. Shame is the signpost that points toward what longs to be integrated. To walk the path of self-worth is to walk into the shadow and emerge with the lost pieces of the self restored to the light of consciousness. Chapter 3, Persona versus True Self. In our last exploration, we spoke of the shadow, that hidden chamber of the soul where shame conceals what it deems unworthy. But shame does not merely repress, it also compels us to build an alternative identity, a mask carefully designed to win approval and avoid rejection. This mask is what I have called the persona. The persona is, in a sense, a necessary creation. No one can move through society without some form of adaptation. When you enter a room, you wear clothes suited to the occasion. When you speak, you adjust your tone depending on whether you address a child, a colleague, or a friend. These adaptations are not lies. They are the costumes that allow us to play our roles on the stage of life. But the danger arises when the persona ceases to be a costume and hardens into a permanent identity. When we confuse the mask for the face, we lose touch with the true self that lies beneath. And when shame is strong, the persona becomes not just a social convenience, but a fortress, a wall designed to hide all that we fear is unacceptable. Imagine a man who has been shamed for his vulnerability. His persona may be one of invincibility, projecting strength and composure at all times. To the world, he appears confident, perhaps even unshakable. But inside he trembles with loneliness, for no one knows his inner pain. His mask, meant to win acceptance, becomes the very barrier that prevents true intimacy. Or imagine a woman who has been shamed for anger. Her persona may be one of endless gentleness, always agreeable, always accommodating. She smiles even when she is wounded. She gives even when she is empty. To others, she appears kind and selfless. Yet beneath the mask, resentment festers. She longs to speak her truth, but shame whispers that to do so would make her unlovable. The persona then is both protection and prison. It shields us from the sting of shame, but it also prevents us from living authentically. We present a polished surface to the world while hiding the depth of our true being. Over time, we may even forget who we are beneath the mask. The problem with living from the persona is that it makes love conditional. If I believe that only my mask is acceptable, then I must also believe that my true self is unworthy. And if someone loves me while I wear the mask, I may secretly fear if they knew the real me, they would leave. Thus, the persona breeds insecurity, for it cannot receive unconditional love. Only the true self, revealed in vulnerability, can know that it is loved as it is. You see, shame and the persona work hand in hand. Shame says, hide your true self, it is unworthy. The persona replies, very well, I will create a self that earns approval. And so the dance continues. The shadow grows darker, the mask grows thicker, and the soul grows lonelier. But one must not imagine that the persona is wholly false or useless. It is not to be destroyed, but balanced. Just as an actor must know the difference between the role and the person behind it, so too must we know that the persona is only a part of us. Healthy adaptation to society is necessary. Complete identification with the mask is destructive. How then does one begin to distinguish between the persona and the true self? The first step is awareness. Ask yourself, where in my life do I feel I am performing? Where do I hide my genuine feelings behind a mask of politeness, competence, or strength? What parts of me have I decided are too risky to show? These questions open the door to authenticity. The second step is experimentation. Dare to let the mask slip in safe places. Share a vulnerable truth with a trusted friend. Express an unpopular opinion. Allow yourself to show sadness or anger or joy, even if it feels frightening. Each act of authenticity chips away at shame's hold, teaching the soul that it can be seen and still loved. The third step is compassion. When you notice the mask, do not scold yourself. The persona was created for survival. It was your way of protecting yourself when shame felt unbearable. Thank it for its service, and then gently remind yourself that you no longer need to live entirely behind it. The true self deserves to breathe. But what is the true self? This is a difficult question, for the true self is not a fixed essence that can be neatly described. It is not a role, not an image, not a definition. It is the totality of your being. Conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, strength and vulnerability. The true self is not perfect, but whole. When I speak of individuation, I speak of becoming the true self, not by discarding the persona, but by integrating it, not by erasing the shadow, but by embracing it. Individuation is the process by which we cease to identify with masks and begin to live from the depths of who we are. Let me illustrate with a metaphor. Imagine a painter who, from childhood, was praised only when he painted cheerful, pretty scenes. Whenever he painted darker images, these storms, grief, chaos, his parents frowned, perhaps even scolded him. Shame taught him that only brightness was acceptable. And so as he grew, his persona became that of the happy artist, producing works that pleased others but left him feeling hollow. One day, he dares to paint from his shadow. He paints anguish, he paints despair, he paints the raw truth of his soul. At first, he is terrified. Shame screams, "They will reject you." But to his surprise, those who view his work are moved, even comforted. They say, "Your painting speaks to my own hidden pain." The very expression that shame condemned becomes a bridge of connection. This is the power of the true self. We must understand that the true self does not emerge all at once. It reveals itself gradually in moments of honesty, in flashes of courage. Each time we risk authenticity, we reclaim a fragment of the self that shame once buried. Over time, these fragments come together, forming a wholeness that feels both ancient and new. There is also a paradox. The persona itself can never be entirely abandoned, for society requires it. But when the true self is integrated, the mask becomes lighter, more flexible. You wear it when necessary, but you are no longer imprisoned by it. You can laugh at your roles, knowing that they are only costumes. The difference is freedom. Let us also consider relationships. The persona thrives in superficial connections, but it suffocates in intimacy. True intimacy demands vulnerability, the willingness to be seen without the mask. Shame resists this, insisting that the mask must remain. But without risking exposure, we remain alone, even in the company of others. Many of the struggles in relationships stem from this conflict between persona and true self. Partners fall in love with each other's masks, only to feel betrayed when the shadow emerges. They blame each other for not being who they seemed, forgetting that beneath the mask was always a fuller, truer being waiting to be known. The challenge is to love not the persona, but the whole person. In therapy, I often see how liberating it is when a patient dares to remove the mask, even for a moment. A man accustomed to being stoic allows tears to fall. A woman accustomed to pleasing others admits her anger. In these moments, there is a spark of recognition. Ah, here I am. This is me. And with that recognition comes relief, for the soul longs above all else to be seen as it truly is. Shame will resist this unveiling. It will whisper, if they see you, they will leave. But the opposite is often true. When we show our true selves, we invite others to do the same. Authenticity begets authenticity. Vulnerability creates connection. The mask isolates, the true self unites. I will say this plainly, you cannot find genuine self-worth through the persona. The mask may earn applause, but applause is not love. The mask may achieve success, but success is not fulfillment. Self-worth arises only when you know that your true self, with all its imperfections, contradictions, and depths, is worthy of existence. This does not mean that everyone will accept you. Some will turn away when the mask falls, for they prefer illusions to reality. But in losing these false connections, you create space for genuine ones. Better to be loved for who you are than admired for who you are not. Let me return to the metaphor of the actor. Imagine spending your whole life playing a role on stage, never stepping into the wings, never removing the costume. The audience applauds, but inside you feel a gnawing emptiness, for you know the applause is not truly for you, but for the mask. To step off stage, to remove the costume, is terrifying. But it is only then that you can discover who you are beyond the performance. And it is only then that you can receive love that is real. Dear listener, I invite you to consider, what is your persona? What mask do you wear to protect yourself from shame? And what lies beneath it, waiting to be seen? Do not rush to strip away the mask completely. That would leave you too exposed. Instead, begin gently. Allow glimpses of your true self to emerge. Notice how the world responds. You may be surprised to find that your authenticity inspires rather than repels. Remember, the persona is not your enemy. It is a tool, a garment. Wear it when you must, but do not confuse it for your face. Your worth does not depend on the mask. It depends on your being, the totality of who you are. To live from the true self is to live with courage. It is to say, I will no longer hide in shame. I will no longer measure my worth by approval. I am willing to be seen, even if it means being misunderstood, for my existence in all its fullness is enough. And so, the journey of self-worth requires that we loosen our grip on the persona and turn gently toward the shadow. Only then can we begin to live not as masks, but as whole human beings. Chapter 4, Individuation and Self-Acceptance. The journey through shame and self-worth cannot be fully understood without speaking of what I have called individuation. This word may sound abstract, but in truth it describes something deeply intimate, the process of becoming who you truly are. Most people live their lives in fragments, one part shaped by family expectations, another by cultural demands, another by personal fears. They wear masks, they bury their shadow, they cling to identities that win approval but leave them hollow. Individuation is the slow, patient work of gathering these fragments and weaving them into a whole. It is the path toward living not as an imitation, but as oneself. Shame is one of the greatest obstacles to individuation, for shame convinces us that certain parts of ourselves are unworthy of integration. It whispers, do not look there, do not accept that, hide this forever. And so large portions of the psyche remain exiled in the unconscious, waiting for recognition. To individuate is to defy shame's command. It is to say, even this belongs, even this has a place in me. It does not mean indulgence in every impulse, nor does it mean excusing every flaw. It means acknowledging the reality of what exists within and seeking to relate to it consciously. Let us consider the psyche as a vast landscape. Some areas are cultivated fields, orderly, visible, admired by others. This is the persona, the part we show to the world. Other areas are dense forests, mysterious and untamed, the shadow where shame has hidden our rejected parts. And beyond both, lie mountains, rivers, caves, the collective unconscious where archetypes dwell. Individuation is the journey across this landscape, claiming each part as one's own, bringing the hidden into dialogue with the known. But why is individuation essential to self-worth? Because only when we embrace the totality of who we are can we feel whole. Self-worth is not the product of perfection, but of integration. A person who denies half of themselves can never feel fully at peace. Shame thrives in division. Individuation dissolves that division by teaching us to accept what was once rejected. Consider a man who has spent his life striving to be the dutiful son, the successful professional, the reliable provider. His persona is impeccable, yet within him lives a neglected artist, a playful child, a passionate lover, all silenced by shame that told him such parts were frivolous or selfish. Individuation invites him to meet these neglected selves, to recognize that they too have value. As he accepts them, he discovers a vitality he had long suppressed. His worth expands, for he no longer measures himself only by duty, but by wholeness. Or imagine a woman who has been taught that anger is unfeminine, that strength is unattractive. She has built her persona around softness, always agreeable, always yielding. Yet deep within burns a fierce spirit, a warrior energy that longs to be expressed. Individuation asks her to turn toward that fire, to accept it as part of her soul. In doing so, she becomes not less gentle, but more whole, capable of both tenderness and power. The task of individuation is not easy. Shame resists it fiercely. The persona clings to its familiar roles. The shadow fights to remain hidden. Yet beneath these resistances lies a longing, the soul's longing to be complete. And when we take even the smallest step toward integration, we feel a deep relief, as if some ancient truth has finally been remembered. Now, how does one practice individuation in daily life? It begins with attention to the inner world. Dreams, fantasies, emotions, and synchronicities all reveal the dialogue between conscious and unconscious. When you dream of what you fear, when you are stirred by sudden envy, when life presents you with repeating patterns, these are invitations to explore the parts of yourself you have ignored. The work also requires self-honesty. To individuate, you must be willing to see yourself without distortion. This includes admitting not only your virtues, but also your flaws, not only your light, but also your darkness. It is tempting to cling to a flattering self-image, but individuation demands the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Most of all, individuation requires acceptance, not passive resignation, but active compassion. To look at one's shadow and say, yes, this too is me. I will not exile it any longer. Acceptance is the antidote to shame. Where shame says, I am unworthy, acceptance says, I am human. Self-acceptance is not complacency. It does not mean we abandon growth or excuse harmful behavior. Rather, it is the foundation upon which genuine transformation is built. For change rooted in shame is fragile. A person who despises themselves may force temporary improvement, but the wound remains. Only when change arises from acceptance can it endure, for it grows from love rather than fear. Let me share a story from my practice. A patient once came to me, a young woman consumed by self-loathing. She had been told since childhood that she was too emotional, that her feelings were excessive, dramatic, shameful. As an adult, she tried to suppress her emotions, cultivating a persona of detachment, but inwardly she battled despair, convinced she was defective. Through our work, she slowly allowed herself to feel. She discovered that her emotional depth was not a weakness, but a gift. She could sense subtleties others missed. She could empathize profoundly with those in pain. What shame had branded as a flaw became, through acceptance, a strength. This shift did not happen overnight. It came through many small acts of courage, daring to cry without apology, daring to speak her feelings without shame. In time, she no longer defined her worth by others' approval. She embraced her wholeness, and with it came peace. This is individuation in action, the transformation of shame into self-acceptance, the integration of rejected parts into a fuller self. We must also acknowledge that individuation is a lifelong process. One does not arrive at wholeness once and for all. The psyche is vast, and new layers of the shadow reveal themselves as we grow. Self-acceptance, therefore, is not a single act, but a continual practice. Each time we encounter shame, we have the opportunity to choose acceptance instead of exile. In this sense, individuation is not about becoming perfect, but about becoming real. It is about living in alignment with the truth of who we are, rather than the mask of who we think we should be. Some may ask, why is this work so difficult? Why does shame cling so tightly? The answer lies in our fear of rejection. To reveal the shadow feels like risking love itself. But here is the paradox. The love we receive while hiding is never satisfying, for it is directed at the mask, not the self. Only when we risk authenticity can we receive love that truly touches us. Self-acceptance makes this possible, for it teaches us to love ourselves first so that we no longer depend entirely on others' approval. Self-acceptance also alters the way we see others. When we accept our own flaws, we become more compassionate toward the flaws of those around us. We no longer demand perfection, for we know perfection does not exist. We can love others as whole beings, just as we have learned to love ourselves. Let me return to metaphor. Imagine a mosaic composed of thousands of broken pieces, some bright, some dark, some jagged, some smooth. At first glance, the pieces may seem mismatched, even ugly, but when assembled with care, they form a beautiful image, unique and complete. So it is with the self. Shame makes us discard the darker pieces, believing they spoil the picture. But individuation teaches us that every piece belongs. Only when the fragments are united can the full beauty emerge. The process of individuation, therefore, is not merely psychological but spiritual. It is the unfolding of the soul toward wholeness. Self-acceptance is the sacred act that allows this unfolding to continue. Dear listener, I invite you now to reflect: what parts of yourself have you struggled to accept? Where has shame convinced you that you are unworthy? Can you even now whisper to those parts, "You belong, you are part of me, I will not cast you out any longer"? This is the essence of individuation, not to eliminate shame, but to transform it into acceptance, not to erase the shadow, but to integrate it into the light of consciousness. In doing so, you move closer to the true self, not a perfect self, but a whole one. And when you live as a whole being, shame loses its power. You no longer ask, "Am I worthy?" You know deeply and quietly that your worth lies not in masks, not in approval, not in perfection, but in your very existence. Chapter 5: Dreams and the Language of Shame. When we explore shame and self-worth, we must turn our attention to the inner world, the world that exists beyond the surface of conscious thought. Dreams, visions, and symbols are not random. They are the language of the unconscious. And in this language, shame often speaks most clearly, most urgently, yet most subtly. The conscious mind often resists shame. It prefers to rationalize, to distract, to deny. But the unconscious has no such defenses. It communicates through images, stories, and symbols, revealing truths we might otherwise ignore. Dreams are particularly valuable because they bypass our censorship. They show us the hidden dynamics of our psyche, including the parts we have shamed and the ways we have denied our own worth. Shame in dreams often appears in symbolic form. A common image is falling, tripping, or being exposed. Such dreams are not merely about fear of physical harm. They represent the inner experience of being judged, rejected, or unworthy. A person may dream of being naked in public, a universal motif of vulnerability and exposure. This dream does not mean one literally fears nudity. It is a representation of shame, the fear that one's hidden self will be seen and condemned. Consider another common motif: being lost, wandering, or trapped. A dreamer may find themselves in a dark forest, a labyrinth, or a locked room. Here, the unconscious is showing the isolation that shame creates in waking life. The person feels cut off from others, unsure of how to express themselves, constrained by the internalized judgment that says, "You are not enough." Yet dreams do not speak only of danger or fear. They also offer guidance. They show the paths through the darkness, the keys to self-acceptance, the doorways to individuation. If we learn to interpret their symbols with curiosity rather than fear, we can uncover profound insights about our relationship to shame. For example, a dream may present a figure who embodies a forbidden trait, anger, sexuality, assertiveness, that the dreamer has long repressed. At first, this figure may seem threatening, but by engaging with it in the imagination, by seeing it as part of oneself rather than an enemy, the dreamer begins to reclaim the hidden energy that shame has suppressed. Shame also speaks in dreams through the distortion of familiar people and situations. A dreamer may encounter family members behaving unusually, expressing anger, criticism, or indifference in ways that echo childhood experiences. These dreams are not accusations, they are mirrors reflecting the internalized voices of judgment that shaped the psyche. Recognizing this allows the dreamer to differentiate between past conditioning and present self-worth. It is important to approach dreams with patience and openness. Interpretation is not about imposing meaning, but about dialogue with the unconscious. Ask the images, what are you trying to show me? What do you wish me to understand about myself? Notice feelings, reactions, and intuitive responses. The unconscious communicates in a symbolic language, and our task is to learn to read it with care. Dreams also reveal the interplay between shame and the shadow. When shame drives parts of ourselves into the unconscious, they often return in dreams as exaggerated or frightening figures. A repressed anger may appear as a storm, a monstrous animal, or an oppressive figure. A denied talent may appear as a hidden treasure, a locked chest, or an impossible puzzle. By paying attention to these dream symbols, we learn not only what we have hidden, but also what vitality awaits reintegration. The process of engaging with dreams can be transformative. When a person begins to recognize the shadow within their dreams, to accept it as a part of themselves rather than something to fear, shame gradually loses its grip. The dreamer learns that the hidden self is not unworthy, but powerful, creative, and necessary for wholeness. Dreams also provide a rehearsal space for self-acceptance. In the imagination of a dream, one can confront fears safely, test responses, and practice integration. A dream may allow a person to express anger without harming others, to speak truth without fear of rejection, to embrace a part of themselves they have long denied. In this way, the dream world becomes a laboratory for individuation. Shame may attempt to resist this process. It may distort dreams, repeat themes, or create anxiety, but persistence, reflection, and compassionate attention allow the dreamer to decode the messages. Over time, recurring symbols become familiar guides pointing toward areas of life where shame is active and where acceptance is needed. The relationship between shame and dreams also extends to the collective unconscious. Some symbols, motifs, and archetypes appear across cultures, generations, and individuals. The fear of exposure, the sense of inadequacy, the longing for recognition. These are universal experiences, and they manifest in shared imagery. Recognizing these patterns can alleviate the sense of isolation that shame imposes, reminding us that we are not alone in our struggles. Let me illustrate with a case from practice. A young man repeatedly dreamed of being trapped in a dark corridor, pursued by shadows he could not name. At first, he felt terror and helplessness, but over time, he began to explore the dream actively. He spoke to the shadow figures, asked what they wanted, and listened. Gradually, he realized that the shadows represented aspects of his creativity and sensitivity that he had hidden, fearing ridicule and rejection. By integrating these traits into his waking life, he discovered new confidence, deeper self respect, and a capacity for genuine connection with others. The dream was not merely a story, but a map guiding him towards self worth. Dreams also remind us that shame is not fixed. What is hidden today may be revealed tomorrow. The unconscious is patient, persistent, and wise. It holds no judgment. It seeks only to guide toward wholeness. By listening to dreams, we learn to trust this guidance, to see shame not as a permanent condemnation, but as a signpost for growth. We can also engage with dreams creatively, writing them down, drawing their images, dramatizing them, or reflecting on their emotions can deepen understanding. Each encounter with the unconscious is an opportunity to reclaim what shame has obscured, to integrate what has been exiled, and to move closer to the authentic self. Another important aspect of dreams is the dialogue with archetypes. Archetypes are universal patterns within the collective unconscious. Figures such as the hero, the mother, the trickster, the wise old man or woman. Shame often distorts these archetypes in dreams, presenting them as threatening or unattainable. Yet by recognizing the archetype and understanding its role, the dreamer can reclaim its power. For instance, the wise old woman may appear in a dream as a harsh critic. In truth, she represents inner guidance, the voice of conscience and self-compassion. By listening, the dreamer learns to transform shame into insight. The ultimate purpose of engaging with dreams is not to eliminate shame, that is impossible, but to cultivate consciousness, integration, and self-acceptance. Shame loses its unconscious power when we illuminate it, when we encounter it with understanding rather than fear. Dreams are the lanterns that light the hidden corners of the psyche, revealing the paths that lead to wholeness. I encourage the listener to keep a dream journal. Upon waking, write down images, emotions, dialogues, and sensations. Later, review them without judgment. Ask, what part of me is speaking here? What aspect of shame is being revealed? What hidden treasure awaits recognition? Over time, patterns emerge and the dialogue deepens. Finally, remember that dreams are a partnership between conscious and unconscious. We do not dominate the unconscious, we converse with it. Shame may be persistent, but the soul's desire for wholeness is stronger. By engaging patiently, we gradually transform shame from an invisible enemy into a guide pointing towards self-worth, authenticity, and inner freedom. In conclusion, dreams are the language through which shame communicates. They reveal what we hide, what we fear, and what we deny. They also show us the potential within the shadow, the paths toward acceptance, and the steps toward individuation. To attend to our dreams is to listen to the deepest voice of the self, the voice that knows both the wound and the healing, both the shame and the worth that has always existed beneath it. And so, dear listener, I invite you to approach your dreams with openness, curiosity, and compassion. Let them speak to you without fear. Let them guide you into the hidden places of the psyche where shame lives, and let them illuminate the treasures of your true self. In this sacred dialogue, you may begin to feel ever more deeply that you are enough, that the soul in all its complexity and depth is worthy of love, acceptance, and wholeness. Chapter 6, Transforming Shame into Self-Worth. Shame, by its very nature, tells us that we are insufficient, flawed, or unworthy. It whispers that our thoughts, our feelings, our desires are unacceptable. And when we listen too closely, shame shapes our self-perception, undermining our confidence and distorting our sense of value. Yet shame is not the end of the story. Within it lies a signal, a call to attention, a guide pointing towards self-understanding and wholeness. To transform shame into self-worth is not to deny its presence, but to acknowledge it, confront it, and integrate it into conscious life. The first step in this transformation is awareness. We cannot change what we do not recognize. Shame often operates subtly, hiding in our judgments, in our self-criticism, in the voices of internalized authority. A person may find themselves shrinking from opportunities, avoiding confrontation, or feeling undeserving of success, all driven by shame's quiet insistence. By noticing these patterns, we begin to illuminate the unseen currents that shape our thoughts and behaviors. Awareness is the first act of courage. Once we recognize shame, the next step is reflection. Ask yourself, what is the origin of this shame? Which past experiences, societal expectations, or internalized criticisms have contributed to it? Understanding the roots of shame is not an exercise in blame, but in insight. It allows us to see that shame is often conditioned, inherited, and misplaced. By identifying the sources, we can separate the authentic self from the imposed judgments that have created unnecessary suffering. And it is also essential to practice compassion toward oneself. Shame thrives on self-rejection and harsh judgment. Transformation occurs when we respond with gentleness rather than hostility. Speak to yourself as you would to a child or a friend, with patience, encouragement, and understanding. Say to yourself, I see you, I hear you. You are not defined by these judgments. In doing so, we create a space in which self-worth can emerge naturally. Another powerful strategy involves dialogue with the shadow. The parts of ourselves that shame has hidden are not enemies. They are aspects of our being that seek acknowledgement. Anger, desire, vulnerability, ambition, creativity, these may have been labeled unacceptable, yet they contain vitality and potential. By consciously acknowledging these traits, we reclaim energy that was previously fragmented or suppressed. We can say, this too is part of me. It is neither shameful nor dangerous. It has a role in my wholeness. Transformation also requires integration of experiences. Life inevitably brings moments that trigger shame, a failure, a critique, a perceived inadequacy. Instead of reacting with avoidance or self-judgment, one can use these experiences as mirrors for self-exploration. Ask, what part of me feels wounded? What expectation am I holding that creates this shame? How can I respond with understanding rather than condemnation? Each reflective moment strengthens the connection to the authentic self, reinforcing self-worth. We must also consider boundaries. Shame often arises when we overextend ourselves, seeking validation through conformity or sacrifice. Learning to set healthy boundaries, to honor one's own needs, limits, and values is a form of self-respect. It communicates to the psyche that our worth is inherent, not contingent on pleasing others or meeting external standards. Boundaries are not selfish. They are the framework within which self-worth can flourish. Another essential aspect of transformation is expression. Shame thrives in silence and secrecy. By finding safe and constructive ways to express feelings, thoughts, and desires, we release the tension that shame accumulates. This can take many forms: speaking with a trusted friend, journaling, engaging in creative work, or participating in reflective practices such as meditation or movement. Expression affirms that our inner world is valid, real, and worthy of attention. Ritual and symbolism also play a role. Humans are inherently symbolic beings. We understand our experiences through acts, images, and ceremonies. Engaging in small personal rituals, lighting a candle while reflecting on one's worth, writing affirmations, or creating symbolic art can reinforce the conscious acceptance of self-worth. Symbols carry meaning beyond words, speaking directly to the unconscious and helping to integrate what shame has obscured. A further practice is reframing failure and imperfection. Shame often convinces us that mistakes define us, that flaws are intolerable. Yet failure is part of the human condition and a vital teacher. By viewing errors as opportunities for learning rather than evidence of inadequacy, we cultivate resilience and self-respect. The imperfect self is not unworthy. It is real, dynamic, and capable of growth. Community and relationship are also vital. Shame isolates while connection heals. Seek relationships that allow authenticity, where vulnerability is met with acceptance, not judgment. Observe how shame manifests in social dynamics. Notice when you hide aspects of yourself or when others impose shame. Through conscious engagement with supportive others, self-worth is reinforced and shame's power diminishes. Mindfulness and embodiment offer additional tools. Shame often resides not only in thought, but in the body, a tight chest, hunched shoulders, or tense muscles. By bringing awareness to bodily sensations, by breathing into tension, or engaging in movement practices, one can release the somatic residue of shame. The body becomes a partner in cultivating self-worth, signaling to the mind that presence and acceptance are possible. It is crucial to recognize that transformation is gradual. Shame is persistent, shaped over years by culture, family, and experience. One encounter, one insight, one act of acceptance does not dissolve it entirely. Transformation is cumulative. It unfolds over time through consistent awareness, reflection, expression, and integration. Patience is not optional, it is essential. Consider a person who has carried shame about their intelligence, feeling inferior despite accomplishments. Initially, they may respond defensively, comparing themselves to others or minimizing their abilities. Through conscious work, observing these feelings without judgment, acknowledging strengths and limitations, practicing self-compassion, they begin to internalize a sense of worth. Over months and years, repeated engagement with these practices transforms the inner dialogue from one of condemnation to one of recognition and acceptance. Self-worth becomes a lived experience rather than an aspiration. Stories and metaphors illuminate this process. Imagine a gardener tending a neglected plot of land. Weeds of shame have overgrown, choking the soil and hiding hidden potential. The gardener must first recognize the weeds, understand why they grew, and gently remove them without harming the underlying life. Then seeds of self-worth, nourished by sunlight and water, can take root. Growth is not instantaneous, but persistent care yields transformation. The garden may never be perfect, but it will be vibrant, alive, and uniquely beautiful. Another metaphor, envision a sculptor chipping away at a block of stone. Shame is like layers of grime that obscure the form within. Through careful attention, patience, and deliberate work, the sculptor gradually reveals the figure already present in the stone. The true self, like the statue, exists beneath the surface. It is not created anew, only uncovered. Transformation is recognition, not invention. Finally, transformation into self-worth invites a shift in perspective. Rather than asking, am I enough? The question becomes, can I accept myself fully, even with flaws, fears, and limitations? This subtle shift moves from conditional approval to unconditional acceptance. Self-worth is not granted by achievement, external praise, or comparison. It arises naturally when we acknowledge, honor, and integrate all parts of ourselves. In conclusion, transforming shame into self-worth requires a multifaceted approach: awareness, reflection, compassion, dialogue with the shadow, integration of experiences, boundary setting, expression, symbolism, reframing, supportive relationships, embodiment, and patience. Each practice strengthens the connection to the authentic self and diminishes shame's unconscious power. Dear listener, remember the journey is not linear and setbacks are natural. Shame may persist, returning in new forms, but with consistent attention and compassion, it becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant. Each moment of conscious engagement reaffirms the truth. You are worthy not because of accomplishments or perfection, but because you exist as a whole, complex, and evolving human being. In the sacred work of facing shame, embracing the shadow, and integrating the self, self-worth is born. It is a quiet, steady recognition that your life, your being, your inner world, all of it has value. And in that recognition lies freedom, peace, and the profound experience of being fully, unmistakably alive. Chapter 7, Shame in Relationships. Shame is rarely confined to the individual psyche. It flows outward, shaping the ways we connect with others. From our earliest experiences in family, community, and society, we internalize messages about what is acceptable and what is not. These messages form the lens through which we perceive ourselves and, by extension, how we interact with others. In relationships, shame manifests subtly yet profoundly, influencing trust, intimacy, communication, and self-expression. Understanding its dynamics is crucial for transforming both our inner and outer worlds. From the earliest bonds we form, shame begins to influence behavior. Children who are criticized, ridiculed, or rejected for their feelings, impulses, or mistakes learn to conceal parts of themselves. They develop a persona, a mask that garners approval while hiding vulnerability. In adulthood, this persona continues to shape relationships. Partners may encounter a version of ourselves that is carefully curated, while the authentic self remains veiled, hidden behind layers of protection. Shame in relationships often appears as fear of rejection. We hesitate to express our true feelings, to voice opinions, or to reveal needs because we fear being judged or abandoned. This fear creates distance. Intimacy requires vulnerability, yet shame discourages exposure. The paradox is that our attempts to avoid rejection by hiding ourselves frequently produce the very disconnection we most dread. Consider a couple in which one partner feels ashamed of anger. They may smile, nod, and comply even when boundaries are crossed. Outwardly, harmony exists, yet inside, tension accumulates, resentment simmers, and authentic communication is stifled. The relationship may appear stable, but it lacks the depth of mutual understanding. Only by acknowledging and expressing the hidden feelings safely and consciously can the relationship move toward true intimacy. Shame also influences how we perceive others. We project our own fears and insecurities onto those around us. A person who feels unworthy may interpret neutral remarks as criticism or perceive distance where there is none. These projections create miscommunication, conflict, and unnecessary emotional suffering. By recognizing the role of shame in shaping perception, we begin to distinguish between reality and internalized fear, fostering clearer and more compassionate connections. The shadow plays a significant role in relational shame. Traits we have repressed, jealousy, desire, ambition, assertiveness, often appear in interactions in exaggerated or reactive forms. A person may unconsciously provoke situations that mirror the internal conflict, drawing out responses that validate the shameful self-image. For example, someone who fears their own assertiveness may attract partners who challenge them aggressively, reinforcing the belief that anger is dangerous or unacceptable. Awareness of these patterns allows conscious choice rather than unconscious repetition. Shame also shapes attachment styles. Those who have experienced early rejection may develop anxious or avoidant tendencies, seeking reassurance excessively or withdrawing from closeness. Both patterns are attempts to navigate the discomfort shame produces. Individuation and self-acceptance offer remedies. By integrating the shadow and acknowledging intrinsic worth, one can form relationships from authenticity rather than fear, building secure attachment and mutual trust. Intimacy requires not only vulnerability but reciprocal acceptance. Shame often leads to conditional relationships in which approval is sought by conforming to expectations rather than being freely expressed. Transforming shame into self-worth allows for genuine reciprocity. When each person feels worthy, there is no need to manipulate, hide, or perform. Love is no longer transactional. It becomes a mutual recognition of wholeness. Conflict is another arena where shame operates. In moments of disagreement, shame may trigger defensiveness, withdrawal, or projection. A partner may react not to the other's words, but to the internalized sense of inadequacy the words evoke. Conscious awareness of shame in conflict enables a different response, pausing to recognize internal triggers, expressing feelings without attack, and listening without judgment. Through this practice, relationships evolve from battlegrounds to spaces of growth and understanding. Sexuality is deeply intertwined with shame. Many individuals carry shame related to desire, body image, or sexual expression. These feelings inhibit authentic intimacy and can create cycles of avoidance or overcompensation. By integrating shame into conscious awareness, acknowledging desires without judgment, and communicating openly with partners, sexual intimacy can become a source of connection, creativity, and self-affirmation rather than fear. Friendships, too, are influenced by shame. Superficial bonds often rely on personas, while true friendship requires vulnerability. A person may fear judgment and limit self-disclosure, thereby preventing genuine closeness. When shame is recognized and transformed, one can share authentic thoughts, emotions, and experiences, cultivating friendships that are nurturing, supportive, and honest. Parent-child relationships offer another dimension. Parents' own shame can be unconsciously transmitted, shaping expectations, criticism, and emotional responses. Children internalize these signals, forming self-perceptions influenced by shame. Conscious reflection by parents, coupled with modeling self-acceptance, creates a generational ripple of healing. Likewise, adults reflecting on parental shame can reclaim their own self-worth and transform relational patterns. Communication is central to mitigating shame in relationships. Language, tone, and timing matter. Expressing vulnerability requires courage and clarity. Simple statements such as, "I feel hurt by this," or "I'm afraid of being rejected," invite empathy and understanding rather than blame. By speaking from the authentic self, relationships can become laboratories for practicing self-worth and dismantling shame's influence. Empathy is equally crucial. Recognizing that others also carry shame allows us to approach conflicts and differences with compassion. Instead of reacting defensively or judgmentally, one can interpret behaviors as expressions of fear or vulnerability. This perspective fosters patience, reduces conflict, and strengthens relational bonds. Transformation of shame in relationships also involves ritual and shared symbolism, celebrating honesty, acknowledging achievements, or creating shared practices for expressing appreciation reinforces intrinsic worth. Rituals need not be elaborate. Even small acts, a note of gratitude, a shared pause for reflection, a weekly check-in, can embody recognition, acceptance, and validation. Therapeutic relationships provide a model. In therapy, individuals experience being seen without judgment, their shadow acknowledged and accepted. This experience can be internalized and carried into other relationships. The patient learns that worth is inherent, not contingent on flawless performance or external approval. The process is gradual, often requiring repeated experiences of trust and authenticity, yet it is profoundly transformative. Another essential practice is self-reflection after interaction. After conversations or conflicts, consider what parts of myself were hidden, what shame was triggered, how did I respond? This reflective practice deepens awareness, strengthens self-worth, and enhances relational skills. Over time, it becomes easier to respond from authenticity rather than reactivity. Forgiveness plays a role as well. Often, shame in relationships involves perceived past failures, betrayals, or mistakes, our own or others. By practicing forgiveness, we release the weight of past judgment, acknowledging human imperfection while retaining respect for the self and others. Forgiveness is not condoning harmful behavior, it is an act of liberation, allowing self worth to flourish. Consider the metaphor of a bridge. Shame constructs walls, isolating individuals from each other, cutting them off from understanding, love, and connection. Self worth builds the bridge, spanning the distance with authenticity, acceptance, and trust. Each act of vulnerability, honesty, and compassion strengthens the structure, allowing safe passage for both self and others. Let us also recognize that transformation in relationships is cumulative. One conversation, one gesture of authenticity, one moment of self acceptance does not immediately eradicate shame. Yet each action leaves a lasting imprint, gradually reshaping dynamics, fostering trust, and reinforcing intrinsic worth. Relationships become arenas of growth rather than arenas of fear. Finally, remember that self-worth is inherently relational. While it originates within, its expression and reinforcement often emerge through interactions. When we approach relationships with honesty, compassion, and authenticity, we create reciprocal environments that validate self-worth and diminish shame. The transformation is mutual, benefiting both self and others. In conclusion, shame in relationships operates quietly yet profoundly, shaping communication, intimacy, trust, and perception. Transformation occurs through awareness, reflection, dialogue with the shadow, compassion, authentic expression, boundary setting, forgiveness, and ritual. By cultivating self-worth, we not only heal ourselves, but also elevate the quality of our connections. Relationships cease to be arenas of fear and judgment and become spaces where authenticity, understanding, and love flourish. Dear listener, consider, where does shame influence your interactions? How might you bring awareness, courage, and acceptance into your relationships? Each deliberate act of honesty and vulnerability, each conscious choice to honor your authentic self, strengthens both your inner sense of worth and the bonds you share with others. In this sacred interplay of self and other, shame loses its dominion, and the human capacity for love, connection, and wholeness shines forth. Chapter 8, Shadow Work Exercises for Daily Life. To confront shame and cultivate self-worth, one must engage actively with the shadow, those aspects of the self that have been hidden, denied, or rejected. Shadow work is not a passive reflection. It is a deliberate practice of bringing unconscious material into awareness, exploring it, and integrating it into conscious life. Through this process, shame loses its hidden grip, and self-worth emerges as a living experience rather than an abstract concept. The first exercise in shadow work is self-observation. Begin by noticing moments when shame arises in daily life. A comment from a colleague, a memory from the past, a fleeting thought that triggers discomfort. Do not judge the feeling or push it away. Instead, approach it with curiosity. Ask yourself, what part of me feels attacked? What belief or expectation is being triggered? Observe the body, the emotions, and the thoughts. Awareness is the foundation of transformation. A related practice is emotional journaling. Each day, record instances in which shame was present, the circumstances that elicited it, and the accompanying feelings. Include reflections on what triggered the shame and what judgments or beliefs underlie it. Over time, patterns will emerge, revealing the shadowed areas that require attention. The journal becomes both a mirror and a map, guiding conscious engagement with hidden aspects of the self. Dialogue with the shadow is a more advanced exercise. Imagine the part of yourself that feels shame as a separate figure in your inner world. Speak to it directly, asking questions such as, why are you hiding? What do you need from me? Listen to its response without judgment or dismissal. The dialogue can be verbal, written, or visualized. This practice cultivates understanding and integration, allowing the once hidden aspects to contribute their vitality rather than remain exiled. Another essential exercise is identifying projections. Pay attention to emotional reactions toward others that seem intense or disproportionate. Often the qualities we judge in others reflect parts of ourselves we have rejected. For example, strong envy toward a colleague may reveal suppressed ambition. Irritation at a friend's assertiveness may indicate discomfort with one's own assertive desires. By recognizing these projections, we reclaim the energy and traits that shame has obscured. Creative expression offers a powerful pathway for shadow work. Engage in art, writing, music, or movement that embodies feelings and traits you have long suppressed. Let anger, fear, desire, and vulnerability find expression in forms that feel safe and authentic. Creative engagement allows the shadow to speak in symbols and metaphors, bypassing the rational mind's defenses and revealing truths that might otherwise remain inaccessible. Mindfulness and embodiment practices further facilitate shadow integration. Shame often resides in the body as tension, constriction, or avoidance. Through mindful awareness of bodily sensations, breathing practices, and gentle movement, one can release stored tension, attend to emotional cues, and reconnect with parts of the self that have been marginalized. Body and mind are partners in the work of integration. A practical exercise involves identifying shame triggers in daily life. Throughout the day, notice situations that evoke feelings of inadequacy, embarrassment, or discomfort. Pause and reflect. What part of me is reacting? What story am I telling myself? By consciously recognizing triggers, we gain the ability to respond from awareness rather than unconscious reaction, gradually transforming habitual patterns of shame into conscious self-respect. Visualization techniques also support shadow work. Picture an interaction, a memory, or an imagined scenario that elicits shame. Visualize yourself approaching the situation with curiosity, compassion, and acceptance. Imagine dialogue, understanding, or the integration of previously hidden aspects. Visualization allows rehearsal of transformation in a safe mental space, preparing one to respond authentically in waking life. Affirmations can be employed thoughtfully within shadow work. Instead of empty or generic statements, craft affirmations that address specific hidden parts. For example, I am allowed to feel anger and express it constructively, or my creativity is valuable even when imperfect. Repeating such affirmations in the context of reflection and awareness strengthens conscious acknowledgement and reduces the power of shame. Another exercise is role play with the shadow. Imagine a scenario in which a repressed quality, trait, or feeling is expressed fully and consciously. Act out the scenario in imagination or with a trusted partner. Observe the responses, both internal and external. This practice allows the integration of shadow aspects into daily life, fostering courage, authenticity, and self-worth. Ritual acts of acknowledgement can also be transformative. Light a candle, create a small ceremony, or engage in symbolic gestures to honor the parts of yourself that have been shamed. Speak aloud to the hidden aspects, offering recognition and acceptance. These rituals communicate to the unconscious that the shadow is no longer exiled but welcomed as part of the whole self. Reflection on relational patterns is essential. Identify how shame shapes your interactions with others. Moments of withdrawal, overcompensation, or projection. Reflect on how integrating the shadow could change your relational dynamics. Consider, if I accepted this part of myself, how would I show up differently in my relationships? This practice links personal integration to social and relational transformation, Dream work complements shadow exercises. Upon waking, record dreams, focusing on elements that evoke fear, shame, or resistance. Ask, what part of me is represented in this dream? What message is the unconscious conveying? Over time, recurrent symbols or narratives reveal areas where shame resides and where integration is possible. Engaging with dreams deepens the dialogue between conscious and unconscious, accelerating self-worth development. Guided imagery and meditation can strengthen shadow work. Envision a safe space where you meet hidden parts of yourself. Invite dialogue, understanding, and acceptance. Allow emotions to arise and pass without suppression. Through repeated practice, these meditative encounters gradually normalize shadow integration, reducing shame's intensity and fostering stability of self-worth. A crucial exercise involves examining internalized societal messages. Identify cultural, familial, or social beliefs that have contributed to shame, expectations about appearance, achievement, gender roles, or behavior. Reflect critically on these messages, distinguishing between imposed judgments and authentic self-knowledge. By separating inherited beliefs from personal truth, one dismantles unnecessary shame and strengthens self-worth. Gratitude and acknowledgement practices support shadow integration. Recognize your courage in facing uncomfortable feelings, in acknowledging previously hidden traits, and in taking steps toward authenticity. Gratitude for the self, for resilience, and for progress reinforces self-respect and diminishes shame's hold. Small daily acknowledgements accumulate, creating a profound sense of intrinsic worth. Shadow work journaling prompts can structure reflection. What part of myself did I try to hide today? When did I feel unworthy or ashamed? What internalized messages shape this feeling? How can I express acceptance or integration of this part? What would self-compassion look like in this situation? Regular engagement with these prompts fosters continuous growth, turning each day into an opportunity for transformation. Integration exercises involve taking a trait that has been shamed, anger, desire, ambition, sensitivity, and finding ways to express it constructively. Observe how the expression affects mood, perception, and relationships. This practice reinforces the message that all parts of the self have value and purpose. Finally, recognize that shadow work is ongoing. The unconscious is vast, and new material continually emerges. Some aspects of shame may remain hidden for years, only to surface later. Approach each discovery with patience, curiosity, and compassion. The process is cumulative. Consistent attention, reflection, and integration gradually cultivate self-worth that is enduring, resilient, and deeply grounded. Through these exercises, shame transforms from a tyrant into a guide, illuminating the path toward wholeness. Shadow work is not a destination, but a lifelong companion, offering insight, vitality, and liberation. Self-worth emerges naturally as we reclaim exiled parts of ourselves, honor our complexity, and engage consciously with the hidden dimensions of our psyche. Dear listener, begin with one exercise, one reflection, one conscious act of acceptance. Each step, no matter how small, carries the potential to transform shame into insight, fear into courage, and fragmentation into wholeness. Through persistent and compassionate engagement, you reclaim the self that has always existed beneath the weight of judgment, embracing both shadow and light, and discovering the profound truth: you are inherently worthy, whole, and deeply alive. Chapter 9, The Role of Archetypes in Self-Worth. To understand shame and self-worth, one must consider the archetypes, the universal patterns and figures that inhabit the collective unconscious. Archetypes shape how we experience life, how we relate to others, and how we perceive ourselves. They are not fixed images, but dynamic forces, influencing behavior, thought, and emotion in ways often invisible to conscious awareness. In the context of shame and self-worth, archetypes play a crucial role, revealing both the sources of internalized judgment and the potential for profound self-acceptance. One of the most fundamental archetypes is the shadow, representing the hidden, denied, or rejected aspects of the self. The shadow embodies traits that our conscious identity has disowned: anger, desire, creativity, vulnerability, ambition, or fear. Shame often arises when these qualities are suppressed, whether through cultural norms, familial expectations, or personal fear. The shadow is neither evil nor destructive. It is a reservoir of energy, insight, and vitality that must be recognized and integrated for self-worth to flourish. The persona, another archetype, represents the mask we present to the world. It is the identity shaped by social roles, expectations, and the desire for approval. The persona serves an adaptive function, allowing us to navigate society. Yet, when overdeveloped, it obscures the authentic self and amplifies shame. The individual may feel compelled to perform, to please, or to conform, believing their value depends on external validation rather than intrinsic worth. Recognizing the persona's role allows one to discern between socially conditioned identity and the authentic self, creating space for integration. The anima and animus archetypes, representing the inner feminine and masculine qualities within each individual, also influence self-worth. When these energies are denied or shamed, imbalance arises. A man who suppresses sensitivity may experience shame in emotional expression. A woman who denies assertiveness may feel shame in ambition. Integrating anima or animus leads to inner harmony, cultivating confidence and authentic self-expression. Shadow work often intersects here as the repressed qualities emerge from the unconscious, demanding acknowledgement. The hero archetype provides insight into the journey of self-worth. The hero embodies courage, resilience, and the pursuit of transformation. When shame dominates, the hero's journey is interrupted by fear and self-doubt. Yet the hero's path illustrates that challenges, failures, and internal resistance are essential to growth. Engaging with the hero archetype allows one to frame shame as part of a developmental process rather than a condemnation, transforming obstacles into opportunities for self-recognition and empowerment. The wise old man or woman archetype offers guidance in the form of inner wisdom and reflection. Shame often leads to internalized voices of criticism. The wise old archetype counters this with insight, perspective, and reassurance. Engaging with this archetype through meditation, visualization, or dialogue helps one reinterpret shame not as inherent flaw, but as a signal for conscious attention and self-integration. The voice of wisdom within us offers patience, perspective, and encouragement on the path towards self-worth. Projections of archetypes are particularly relevant in relationships. Individuals often project archetypal qualities onto others, seeing a partner as judgmental, critical, nurturing, or heroic, when in fact these are reflections of their own internal dynamics. Recognizing projections allows one to reclaim the qualities that have been denied and integrate them consciously. This reclamation diminishes shame and strengthens self-respect. The trickster archetype embodies disruption, humor, and unpredictability. While often associated with chaos, the trickster challenges rigid identification with shame and perfectionism. By introducing flexibility and levity, the trickster invites one to see errors, fears, and self-judgments from a lighter perspective. The archetype encourages experimentation, creative problem solving, and the recognition that imperfection is not failure, but an essential part of the human experience. Shame often manifests as resistance to archetypal energy. For instance, the mother archetype represents nurturing, acceptance, and unconditional support. If one internalizes criticism or lacks affirmation, the nurturing energy may feel inaccessible, reinforcing feelings of inadequacy. By consciously connecting with the mother archetype within oneself or through supportive figures, one cultivates self-compassion and emotional nourishment, counteracting shame's constriction. Similarly, the father archetype embodies authority, guidance, and protection. When internalized as punitive rather than supportive, it amplifies shame, creating rigid standards and internalized judgment. Reinterpreting the father archetype as a source of guidance, not condemnation, allows one to replace fear with confidence, learning, and ethical alignment. Integration of the parental archetypes is therefore central to cultivating balanced self-worth. The self archetype represents the totality of the psyche, the integration of conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, persona and essence. It is the guiding principle of individuation, the process through which one becomes whole. Shame is often experienced as fragmentation, the sense that parts of the self are unacceptable or hidden. Engaging consciously with the self archetype allows recognition that all parts, even those previously shamed, belong to a unified whole. Through this lens, self-worth is inherent, not contingent upon performance, approval, or perfection. Engaging archetypes in practical exercises strengthens self-awareness. One method is active imagination, where the individual dialogues with archetypal figures in the imagination, exploring their qualities, motivations, and insights. A person might encounter the shadow, ask why it is hidden, and receive guidance for integration. Or they may meet the wise old woman, asking how to navigate self-doubt. These exercises cultivate direct engagement with unconscious material, diminishing shame and reinforcing intrinsic value. Symbolic art or writing provides another avenue. Create images, narratives, or poems representing archetypal figures, qualities, or conflicts. Observe recurring motifs and themes, paying attention to those that evoke discomfort, fear, or shame. These expressions externalize unconscious dynamics, facilitating conscious reflection and integration. Over time, the archetypal patterns reveal both the sources of shame and the keys to self-worth. Dream analysis remains central to understanding archetypes. Dreams often present archetypal figures in vivid symbolic form. A dream of a stern teacher may reflect the internalized father. A nurturing figure may represent the mother. A shadowy pursuer may reveal the repressed shadow. By reflecting on these figures, considering their qualities, and dialoguing with their meaning, one can integrate the archetypal energies, transforming shame into insight and self-recognition. The interplay of archetypes also explains cycles of shame. Often, one archetype triggers fear or avoidance, while another offers potential for healing. For example, the trickster may provoke embarrassment, but the hero provides courage, and the wise old woman offers guidance. Conscious awareness of this interplay allows strategic engagement, leaning into supportive archetypal energy while acknowledging the lessons of challenging figures. In relationships, archetypes shape both perception and interaction. Recognizing the archetypal dynamics in others, not as literal traits, but as projections and mirrors, helps navigate conflict, deepen intimacy, and reclaim disowned aspects of self. The partner's criticism may reflect the internalized punitive father. Their encouragement may awaken the hero within. By seeing relationships through an archetypal lens, shame loses its grip, replaced by insight, empathy, and conscious participation. A practical exercise involves mapping personal archetypes, identify which archetypes are active, which are repressed, and which are projected onto others. Reflect on how each influences self-worth and shame. For instance, a dominant shadow may provoke internal fear, while a dormant hero may limit confidence. By acknowledging each archetype, one cultivates a conscious relationship with them, reclaiming energy and balancing internal dynamics. Integration is the ultimate goal. The archetypes are not forces to be controlled, but companions to be understood, dialogued with, and harmonized. Through conscious engagement, the shadow is reclaimed, the persona balanced, the hero activated, and the self recognized. Shame, which thrives on fragmentation and concealment, loses power as the individual attains a holistic understanding of the psyche. Self-worth arises naturally as an inherent reflection of wholeness. Consider the metaphor of a theater. Archetypes are actors on the stage of the psyche, each playing a role. Shame may insist that some actors are unwelcome, demanding silence or exile. The conscious self, as director, gradually invites all actors to perform their parts authentically. As the play unfolds with awareness and integration, the narrative becomes richer, more harmonious, and profoundly truthful. In this theater, self-worth is not earned. It is lived, expressed, and embodied. In conclusion, archetypes illuminate both the sources of shame and the pathways to self-worth. By engaging with the shadow, persona, anima, animus, hero, wise old woman, man, trickster, and parental figures, one gains insight into unconscious dynamics, integrates repressed qualities, and cultivates intrinsic value. The self-archetype unifies these energies, guiding individuation and fostering holistic self-acceptance. Dear listener, reflect on your internal archetypes. Who is speaking? Who is hidden? Who needs acknowledgement? Engage with them through imagination, dreams, journaling, and creative expression. In doing so, shame transforms from an obstructive force into a guide, and self-worth emerges as the natural consequence of conscious, compassionate engagement with the totality of the psyche. Chapter 10. Maintaining self-worth amid life's challenges. Self-worth is not a static state. It is a living, evolving quality that requires conscious attention and cultivation, especially when life presents difficulties. Challenges, whether external or internal, test the stability of self-perception and often trigger old patterns of shame. Maintaining self-worth is a deliberate practice, one that requires awareness, reflection, integration, and resilience. In this chapter, we explore how to preserve and strengthen self-worth amid adversity, drawing upon the principles of shadow work, archetypal understanding, and conscious engagement with the psyche. The first principle is awareness of triggers. Life presents a continuous stream of circumstances that may evoke shame, self-doubt, or insecurity. A harsh comment, failure, comparison, rejection, or loss. By noticing these triggers, we prevent automatic reactivity. Observe the physical sensations, emotions, and thoughts that arise. Ask, what part of me is reacting? What belief or story is being activated? Awareness interrupts the unconscious cycle of shame and creates the space for conscious response. Closely related is the principle of self-reflection. After experiencing a challenge, pause to consider its impact on your sense of worth. What judgments arose? Which parts of the shadow were activated? How did your persona respond? Reflecting in this way allows understanding rather than condemnation. Life's difficulties become mirrors, revealing unresolved patterns and offering opportunities for growth rather than proving inadequacy. Compassion towards self is essential. Challenges often magnify internal criticism, leading one to question competence, value, or desirability. Respond instead with gentleness. I am allowed to struggle. I am learning. My worth is not defined by this moment. Self-compassion provides emotional resilience, counteracting shame's corrosive effects. It is a stabilizing force, reminding the psyche that intrinsic value is not contingent upon success or failure. Integration of experience is another pillar. Life's trials often activate previously hidden aspects of the self. Rather than denying these emotions or qualities, one can consciously integrate them. Feelings of fear, anger, or sadness are not evidence of weakness. They are signals for attention and understanding. By acknowledging and processing these emotions, one strengthens the continuity of self-worth, reinforcing that the whole self, including vulnerability, is valid and valuable. Maintaining boundaries becomes especially important amid challenges. Shame often arises when we overextend, people please, or tolerate disrespect. Protecting emotional, mental, and physical boundaries communicates self-respect. It affirms that worth is inherent, not contingent on sacrifice or approval. Boundaries are not barriers to connection, they are supports that allow authentic engagement with the world. Supportive relationships are a critical buffer. Surround yourself with individuals who recognize and honor intrinsic worth, who allow vulnerability without judgment, and who model acceptance and authenticity. Social support reinforces self-worth, while toxic interactions amplify shame. Consciously nurturing supportive relationships is a practical and psychological strategy for maintaining stability amid life's fluctuations. Mindfulness and embodiment practices provide additional tools. Life's challenges often produce stress, tension, and dysregulated emotions. Awareness of the body, breath, posture, sensations grounds the psyche in the present. Mindful engagement allows observation without immediate reaction, reducing shame-driven responses. Embodied practices such as movement, yoga, or meditation release accumulated tension, promoting resilience and reinforcing the integrity of self-worth. Shadow work continues to be relevant. Challenges often activate repressed traits or unresolved conflicts. By consciously engaging the shadow, exploring projections, and integrating disowned aspects, one preserves wholeness amid stress. Shadow work transforms difficulty into opportunity, converting moments of shame into insights that strengthen confidence and self-respect. Rituals and symbolic practices can reinforce self-worth. These need not be elaborate. Simple acts, lighting a candle, writing affirmations, pausing for reflection, create tangible markers of commitment to self-value. Ritual provides consistency, particularly in moments of uncertainty, anchoring the individual in a conscious acknowledgement of worth. Reframing adversity is another essential exercise. Challenges are often perceived as threats to self-worth. Yet, from a reflective perspective, they are catalysts for growth. Consider, what can I learn? Which part of myself is emerging? How can this experience strengthen my integrity and authenticity? Reframing transforms life's difficulties into opportunities for self-knowledge and the reinforcement of intrinsic value. Archetypal engagement offers guidance. During hardship, invoking the hero archetype can provide courage, perseverance, and determination. The wise old woman or man offers perspective and reassurance. The shadow may reveal hidden vulnerabilities or unacknowledged fears. By consciously calling upon archetypal energy, one navigates challenges with a balanced, holistic approach, preserving self-worth even when circumstances are adverse. Affirmation practices support psychological resilience. Formulate affirmations that address specific vulnerabilities or challenges. I remain whole and valuable despite difficulty, or my worth is inherent, independent of outcomes. Repetition of such statements, particularly during reflective or meditative periods, reinforces conscious acknowledgement of self-worth and counters the destabilizing effects of shame. Gratitude practices complement this work. Even amid difficulty, noticing small moments of resilience, insight, or connection cultivates a positive internal landscape. Gratitude does not negate challenges but reorients attention toward resources and strengths. This orientation fortifies self-perception and reduces the intensity of shame-driven thoughts. Consistent self-reflection after challenges is essential. Examine patterns, triggers, and responses. Ask, what did I handle well? Where did shame attempt to dominate? How can I respond differently next time? This iterative process creates a feedback loop, strengthening conscious self regulation, increasing resilience, and embedding self worth in lived experience rather than abstract ideals. Learning from mistakes is vital. Shame thrives on error, exaggerating its significance. Yet mistakes are inherent to growth. By viewing them as information rather than condemnation, one maintains perspective and self respect. Each misstep becomes a teacher, revealing areas for improvement without undermining intrinsic value. Adaptation and flexibility are crucial. Life is unpredictable. Rigid adherence to perfection or control amplifies shame. Embrace adaptability, allowing oneself to adjust expectations, methods, and perspectives without judgment. Flexibility fosters resilience and reinforces the message. Self-worth is not defined by perfection, but by the conscious engagement with life. Visualization and mental rehearsal provide additional support. Imagine encountering challenges with courage, wisdom, and authenticity. Visualize responding without self-criticism or avoidance, integrating the shadow and accessing inner strength. Rehearsal in imagination strengthens the psyche's capacity to act from self-worth rather than fear or shame. Engagement with meaning and purpose anchors self-worth. Life's challenges are less threatening when one perceives a coherent sense of purpose. Reflect on personal values, aspirations, and long-term goals. Align actions with these principles, even amid difficulty. Purpose provides a compass, grounding self-perception in enduring principles rather than transient circumstances. Physical health and energy management support resilience. Fatigue, illness, or neglect amplify emotional vulnerability and shame. Maintaining routines for rest, nutrition, movement, and recovery reinforces the foundation upon which self-worth rests. Care for the body is inseparable from care for the psyche, and both sustain the capacity to navigate life with integrity. Celebration of progress is critical. Acknowledge moments of resilience, acts of courage, and successful integration of shadow aspects. Celebrating incremental victories reinforces self-worth, providing motivation and evidence of capability. Recognition of achievement, no matter how small, strengthens the conscious sense of value and diminishes the power of shame. Long-term integration requires patience and persistence. Self-worth is dynamic, continuously tested by life's unpredictability. By combining awareness, reflection, shadow engagement, archetypal insight, ritual, affirmation, gratitude, and self-care, one sustains an inner environment in which worth is resilient, grounded, and self-affirmed. Challenges no longer dictate self-perception, but provide opportunities for deepening understanding, growth, and authenticity. Consider the metaphor of a tree in a storm. Life's challenges are winds and rains that test stability. A tree's roots, awareness, integration, and intrinsic worth anchor it, allowing flexibility and resilience. Branches bend without breaking, leaves may fall, yet the tree endures and grows. So too does the conscious individual, grounded in self-worth, navigating adversity with balance, insight, and courage. In conclusion, maintaining self-worth amid life's challenges requires conscious, ongoing engagement, awareness of triggers, reflective practices, compassion, shadow integration, archetypal guidance, ritual, affirmation, gratitude, adaptability, and self-care collectively sustain a resilient, authentic sense of value. Life will inevitably present trials, yet with these tools, the psyche remains anchored in wholeness and shame loses its power to dominate. Dear listener, reflect on your responses to challenge. Where does shame arise? Which practices strengthen your resilience? Begin with one conscious action today, one reflective pause, one compassionate acknowledgement of your intrinsic worth. Each deliberate act fortifies self-perception, integrates experience, and cultivates enduring self-worth, allowing you to meet life fully, authentically, and courageously. In this ongoing engagement, self-worth is not fragile or conditional. It is the lived experience of a psyche that is aware, whole, and deeply alive,